All right. Thank you, Zoom Voice, for letting us know this meeting's being recorded. Hello, everybody. We welcome you to the Project Portfolio Management webinar with Atlassian tools and Atlassian Marketplace tools. That is why you are here, and we are glad you're here with us. And just want to do some brief introductions between the two of us. My name is Sam Ayers. I'm a delivery manager here at Valiantus. I'm a safe practice consultant and then also an Atlassian expert. And so happy to be with you here today. For my portion, I'll be covering a lot of the tools demonstration. Just want to pitch it over to Don.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
So I'm Don Jacobsmeyer. I am a senior consultant and solutions architect. I have a deep background in custom development and agile teams. And I'll talk about why we talk about portfolio management, why it's helpful to you. How do you know if you're doing it right? What you should hope to get out of it.
Awesome. All right. And to that end, I just kind of wanted to go over the agenda for today and then we'll dive in. So ultimately, as Don just alluded to, we're going to start the webinar by addressing kind of the question, why PPM? Why project portfolio management? And so as Don mentioned, he's going to kind of interweave, or there's going to be some interwoven approaches that we typically take from a consultant standpoint, but then also just talk about some of the tools options, or at least some of the methodologies that we kind of employ as we're helping clients implement PPM solutions. And then ultimately after that, we'll jump into tools options, kind of do a tool deep dive with a native Atlassian tool and then a couple of marketplace add-ons. And then we'll speak on a high level about a few other tools options, and then we'll obviously open it up for questions at the end. So with that, I will pop over to the next slide, and we're going to talk about why portfolio management.
Excellent. Thank you. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to submit them, and we'll maybe try to answer them sort of in stride, or at least have a running log so that we know how many questions we have to answer at the end. So let's get started. What is portfolio management? This is really a practice sort of above your standard day-to-day practice, where you keep track of all of the projects and efforts and initiatives, whatever the right word choice is there for your organization, to keep track of what's going on ultimately. How do you know what your teams are working on? That's frankly a really big question that seems obvious, although when you grow to a scale, it is not always so obvious. And then being able to answer, given what we're working on, can I even accept or start a new project right now? And how do we decide what goes to the top of the list versus what maybe needs to be brought down from a prioritization at a whole sort of project or effort level? When we practice Agile, dates are flexible. And so things change on a hopefully not constant basis, but they change, right? So we need to be able to adapt and be flexible and know, as sort of the air traffic controller of all of the teams, all the projects, what flexibility do we have to move things around? And then when there is something that is urgent that comes up as a fire drill of sorts, how can we cleanly pause something, have resources come into a new higher priority, set the teams up for success so that you're not putting all of the cognitive load on those teams to just figure it out, right? You want to eliminate the cone of uncertainty for them so that they can just dig in and do what they do best. So let's hit the next one.
Yeah.
So if you have a well-developed portfolio practice, you will start to see alignment of what you're working on to a declared enterprise strategy. And again, that seems obvious. However, when you reach a certain scale of number of teams, number of efforts and projects, you may not even know how all of these projects are landing on your team's plates. So you create this alignment to, we're going to focus on work that actually delivers us value in a known way. You'll also be able to see the capacity of resources compared to the demand. When I say resources, I don't mean to, undermine the value that the people deliver, but across all your internal people, maybe contracted external people, understanding how many people do you have to attack how many problems or opportunities that you want to go after. And then you also get to see maybe some of these projects have dependencies across teams, right? And I think that's becoming a common occurrence more and more nowadays, as everything becomes interwoven, interdependent, with integrations all over the place. So how do you cleanly package areas of cross-team dependencies and schedule those to make sure that teams aren't blocked, and you're also not shoving work into teams that they aren't prepared to work on. And that allows for a more predictable cadence where you're working on prioritized scopes of work. And when everything's prioritized and you have a bit more predictability, you don't have so many fire drills. You can hire confidently knowing this is roughly what we need to accomplish over the next 12 to 36 months, depending on how big your efforts are. And that's all super valuable because you can just kind of take the chaos level down a little bit. And then ultimately, your stakeholders and teams have visibility into what's going on. When are things likely to be complete? Not that we're, pegging due dates on things, but are we on track, generally speaking? Or has there been something that has, arisen that we didn't anticipate? And when we use Agile, we know that, okay, something new came up that we didn't know. So we have the opportunity to pause, take a breath. Should we continue the path, or, pivot slightly? Should we change the scope so that we can, maintain all the different requirements that we hold valuable? So like I mentioned, the chaos level goes down. There's fewer fire drills of sorts. And when we talk about risk mitigation, we typically talk about sort of like, hidden and background risk mitigation, where hopefully you will know that you didn't accidentally spend a whole quarter on some project that doesn't necessarily provide a lot of value at the enterprise level, right? Maybe provides a ton of value for one team, but given that it cost X amount and the business value was only Y, what's the risk of now having created this that you need to maintain or decommission if you decide that it doesn't provide enough value, to keep going, right? So these are some of the high level points that we'd want to see people make progress on when they adopt and stabilize a portfolio practice.
Yeah.
So this is a screenshot of a Kanban board that we created that is, no special sauce, but it's a great illustration to show how a portfolio team can manage scopes of work, right? And given that we use Atlassian tooling, I'm always very careful with my word choice when I say projects, because we have Jira projects, and then you may have a scope of work project, and that can get confusing. Common language is so important when words can mean 10 different things. So I'm talking about scopes of work, right? And this could be a year's worth of work. It could be a quarter of work, but generally it's a, large enough scope of work, right? So when new things come to be considered to work on. It falls into a funnel. When we work with clients, we recommend that they have some upfront requirements that stakeholders or whomever's requesting this work can provide, just to make sure that if it's going to go in the funnel, you should have some good information on what it is, why are we doing it, what kind of value does it provide, maybe what's kind of long-term maintenance requirements or costs. And then you as a portfolio team can review it, right? Okay, what would it look like to do this? Do we have the skills internally? Do we need to source those from externally? What's the, again, long-term maintainability? What's the short-term cost and the long-term cost? Are these skills that we want to continue reinvesting in, or are these skills that we don't necessarily need to invest in, and so we should find someone who has those skills and pay slightly more, just so that we don't have to learn a whole new skill to maintain, right? All those kinds of questions that are around high level strategy, not just, can I break this down into user stories, right? And then analyzing, okay, what does it really take to do this? Let's start to break this down, and not necessarily literally into new issues, but even just in documentation, to say, this is a feature, this is a feature, this is a feature, and maybe one team has to do this feature, a different team has to do this feature, because there's these cross-team dependencies, right? So you want to set those teams up for success to say, here's the broad vision, here's how you're contributing to that vision. And then ultimately, if it gets approved, it goes to the teams, it's in a backlog of some kind, it'll get worked on, by whichever teams are contributing to it, and you can follow it through to implementation and whatever done means for you. Done could mean a lot of different things. We work with lots of clients for whom done could just be, we don't need to make any new deployments, even though it's not actually being used by users yet. For some people, done means it is in production, it's being used by users, and we have the next steps for whatever happens after that, right? And there's no wrong answer as long as you know what it means as an organization. It's a little long-winded, but it's such a powerful board where so many activities can happen, that I wanted to just kind of touch each column here. So when you embark on this, there's a handful of considerations that we try to make sure people are aware of up front, because it can be easy to go down one rabbit hole and not be aware that there are other rabbit holes that you should at least know about, right? So we always try to stress and start with people. Who is going to be doing this work for whom? It doesn't have to be which individuals, but it could be like, where in your organization is this going to become a new norm and way of working, right? So do you have a centralized team or team of teams, right? And this will be embedded at a higher level, but with that centralized team. Do you have a number of decentralized teams, and you need to have some centralization of portfolio management that will then, make requests for these different teams to contribute to? So that's a big part of this. The tool just kind of helps streamline the process, but you really need to be clear on who should be doing what for whom. And then the process, right? We showed that Kanban board. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's no one true perfect way. And then the tools. And Sam will talk a ton about tools here shortly, because there's a lot of options and they're all great. They're just different flavors of, kind of the same goal. Another consideration, is to not make too many changes too quickly across too many people. And sometimes, there's a justification for that, but it's important to understand what risks are you incurring if that's the approach that you are pigeonholed into. So you can start with a smaller group to sort of demonstrate this, get through some early kinks, formalize the process to expand out to other teams or a larger department. But it's also so critical to get buy-in and organization at a leadership level to understand, now that there is this portfolio practice in place, how can leadership leverage this new flywheel, this new machine in better and different ways? There was a reason that you were drawn to this. So what does it look like to let go of the old narrative of how you used to do this and embrace the new one? Yeah. And that's a culture and people discussion that really is supportive to have, bottom up and top down adherence to.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's see what else we got. So I'm going to let Sam go through all these cool tools and describe how, all the different features can support all those different topics that I just talked about.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
It was great. And just to Don's point, so these are the tools that I'm going to kind of go through mostly on a high level. So we've got advanced roadmaps, which is a native Atlassian tool. If you're on the premium tier, licensing tier, we've got structure and structure Gantt, big picture and big picture enterprise, and then Jira Line. And Jira Line, just as a precursor, we're just going to more talk about it conceptually. We're not going to deep dive into Jira Line, as we'll mention in a little bit. And repeatedly throughout the presentation, we have a separate webinar that we encourage you to sign up for, just for Jira Line alone. If you know anything about the tool, it's kind of its own beast. We just don't have enough time to dive into it today. It deserves its own webinar. But these are kind of the key players in the PPM realm as far as tool solutions as it stands today within the ecosystem, which is why we're going to cover them. So to that end, let's go ahead and jump into advanced roadmaps. All right, just rearranging my windows here, so pardon me. Okay. All right, to that end. So advanced roadmaps, and what you're seeing is actually an example plan within advanced roadmaps. It's a cross-project and road mapping and visualization tool with some team level capacity capabilities. It's available in Data Center and then also in Jira Cloud Premium, like I mentioned just a moment ago. And as far as the tool organization is concerned, the primary object is what you're actually looking at right now, which is called a plan. And so each plan has its own definable scope, views, scenarios, and permissions. And so what's nice about advanced roadmaps is that you can commit changes to Jira from your plan. And we'll get into that in a moment, but this review changes button denotes that. And so going back to the fact that you do have a big advantage to this tool, and while I'll be honest, I often try to steer folks towards it, is because it is a native Atlassian tool. If you're comfortable within Atlassian tools, I would be shocked if you wouldn't be comfortable almost day one in advanced roadmaps. It's very easy to use. All this being stated, it is not a Gantt chart. So that's something that we get asked about frequently with project or PPM tools. It's not to be treated as a Gantt chart. It is to be treated as a live road mapping tool. So for example, if I move something out date-wise in the plan, it's only going to move that specific bar or issue date. There's not going to be dates that roll with it. And so we'll get into that in a moment. But you could almost look at it even in a simpler view, that it's just a different way to visualize data that's in Jira, work that's in Jira, in kind of a planning fashion. So with that, let's go ahead and actually look at the tool and talk about some of the features therein. So a plan is effectively broken up into three parts. You have the issue hierarchy, which I can expand a little bit here on the left. And then you have the field section, which is currently collapsed, but I can expand it by clicking on the field section. And you see I have a full host of fields here available to me. We'll collapse that just for now. And then we have the roadmap section. So that's kind of the bread and butter of a plan, is those three different sections. And then on the left, you see a roll-up of story and bug that's ultimately, and actually technically down to subtask, that's rolling up to an initiative layer. So within this particular Jira instance, we're recognizing an initiative layer above Epic, and then we have this wonderful roll up to that initiative layer. So there's also different views. You're not married to the hierarchy that you see here. We can expand or collapse all of these too, just as a quick side note. So from a planning perspective, if you just want to look at the initiative layer, you can. That's actually really helpful. But you can also expand all. So just a quick note there. But within the views, you have different views that you can set up within a single plan. So for example, I've got this Epic planning view that has a totally different kind of filtering and or roll up that's just looking at that story, task, bug layer up to that Epic parent. So this is really nice for development teams that kind of just want to look at how they're doing on just kind of that Epic and or kind of sprint that they're currently working in. So just to note too, you're not married to just the one view. You have several different views here available to you that you can create, and you can create your own new custom views as well. So let's go back to initiative planning here. And ultimately, let me partner myself here with my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh yeah, so something important to note too. What is really driving this? It's actually quite simple. There's a field in Jira that used to be called Epic Link. It's now just referred to as parent, which is much less confusing in my opinion. But ultimately, everything that you see here has a parent that it's rolling up to. So you have stories rolling up to the parent of Epic, and then Epic also using the same field of parent in order for it to roll up to initiative. So just a quick side note to highlight that this hierarchy can be built out very, very quickly when you start making that linking relationship between story to Epic up to those layers above Epic that you want to realize. And quite often what we do when we work with teams in implementing this tool is, and I think Don even mentioned it earlier, we work with a small group first and kind of get things linked up, and then ultimately work on a proof of concept throughout the engagement, or at least at the beginning of the engagement, and then that ultimately helps with tool adoption as well. So just a quick side note there. So let's shift to talking about date behavior. So as you can see over here on the right, date behavior is shown in the form of a bar over here on the right. What's really nice and what's really driving these is target start and target end date here. And you actually you're not married to these date fields. You can use start date and due date, for example. So just know that you're not married to using target start and target end. But in our demo, that's what we're currently using. Oh, I didn't want to do that, pardon me. And so ultimately, this date behavior is being driven by these values, as you would expect. But for example, this story here, Alpha 5, if I wanted to just drop a date in here on the roadmap, I could just by clicking in. And ultimately, oh, look at that. It has a predetermined dependency that popped in as well, which is kind of neat to see. But then you also see here that your target start and target end populated immediately. Also, you don't actually have to have defined target start and target end dates. Maybe you only know one or the other. It's going to manifest as this kind of start and fade out to a more finite date. Conversely, if I were to dither out my end date, you'll see a fade off kind of into oblivion here, denoted here on the planning side. There's a lot of versatility here on how you can visualize your start and end dates. You also can work with dependencies within the planning, or at least the roadmap view. So what you actually probably saw as I popped this in, a dependency showing here as well. And you'll see that denoted by kind of this gray yarn here. You can click into the gray yarn and then ultimately see where the dependency lies, and then also see the linked relationship. And this harkens directly back to, if you're familiar with Jira and linking or issue linking relationships, that's going to be denoted here within the tool. Also, too, as a side note, updating an issue's dates will not update its dependence. So Jira links don't achieve what we would expect with a Gantt chart. So with Gantt, obviously start to start, start to finish, etc. So again, just highlighting it's not a Gantt chart. Real quick, I just want to jump over to another screen that I love to show clients because I find it to be very helpful myself, but also just visually it's very appealing. If I pop over here on the left pane, you do have this dependencies really whole section here, and it's a whole other view where you can view dependencies in just a maybe a more meaningful way, or at least a clearer way. And then you have all of these filtering options here where you can change the roll up, you can change how you're grouping those dependencies, you can look at specific projects. And so there's a lot of options here, but just to kind of show you, it's just a really great way to view dependencies in kind of a focused view. Okay, so let's jump to just talking about, oh, one thing I managed to skip over. So the field section, just wanted to show how quickly you can add additional fields here. So if I click the field drop down, first of all, you can collapse or expand all of the fields using that button there. You can drag and kind of rearrange things. You can see the fields that are represented here. We've got our status, our swag, product, etc. You can add additional fields just by clicking this drop down and start typing a field that you want to add. And I will say there's some limitation on what fields are accepted within a plan. That being stated, there's a whole host of them available to you that you can leverage. So if I go into manage custom fields here, I can add more custom fields. And what's nice is ultimately you can see what's supported and what isn't by this toggle up here on the top right. So haven't had many clients run into just a drop down. I absolutely need my unsupported field. For the most time, you can get what you need here.
Could you maybe comment on the difference between custom fields for the plan and custom fields in Jira?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically within this particular plan, you have your Jira fields, you have your custom fields that you can build. And so ultimately, just denoting between the two, you can create custom fields and then have the Jira native fields that you want to add. But to your point, are you talking about specific fields that maybe don't exist in either? Is that what you're talking about, Don?
Yeah, so like the custom field page you were just on,
Yeah,
is my understanding at least, and maybe you can correct me, but is
sure.
like it's a custom field that only exists in the plan.
Oh, right.
So there's no data behind it that would be in Jira. This is just for your portfolio planning purposes.
Yeah. So these custom fields do tie back to Jira custom fields, but you bring up a good point, because ultimately you can add data here within the plan that doesn't necessarily need to be tied back to Jira. And so to your point, when you're doing portfolio planning of some kind, you can add field data here, and those changes aren't technically committed to Jira until you commit them up here on the top right. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's a great question.
Yeah, just to clear up what custom field means there.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. So real quick, let's jump to talking about sandbox capability within advanced roadmaps. So everything, and to that end, actually perfect segue into this, effectively everything you do in the plan is in a sandbox until you commit those changes to Jira. And so you can see that I've made already 6 changes within the plan up here, denoted by the blue button up here on the top right. If I click into that, then I have the opportunity to actually save these changes to Jira. Ultimately, too, I can see a summary by expanding these carets here of what ultimately changed, who modified it, and then what the new value is. I can also look at issues that were changed today or selected on the timeline, so you have some filtering options up there as well. And then this is a really important one to be aware of, whether or not you want to send email notifications for the changes that you're making. So just be aware of this toggle down here as well. You may want it, you may not. But just know also, advanced roadmaps is pretty powerful in the sense that you can enact a lot of change within Jira very quickly as you're making change in the plan. So just being aware of that setting there. So in this case, I'm not going to save these selected changes, but just so you're aware, ultimately, of the idea of changes you make in the plan aren't necessarily committed back to Jira, and that's honestly to the application's advantage, in my opinion. On top of that, you kind of have an extra layer of sandbox capability, you could say, with scenarios. And so you can see over here on the left, I'm using what I'm calling a best case scenario, but you can also switch to, I've just called it this. You're not married to those names for scenarios, but I can pop over to what we've called a worst case scenario, where you can have a totally different subset of data to where you can compare and contrast from a projection standpoint, kind of how your teams are performing, or a whole myriad of other options that are available to you. But kind of another layer up, like I said, it's base level kind of a sandbox, but then you can also have additional scenarios at your disposal that you can add. And so you can create a scenario, name it whatever you want, and then ultimately make a copy of existing scenarios as well.
Sometimes I'll use this to reflect a project with, let's say 2 people working on it, and it's different scenario with maybe 4 people working on it.
Yeah.
So you can, with greater clarity, see what does it tangibly look like if we had more capacity to do the same work, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep. Yeah, and to that end, also great segue into talking about resourcing behavior. Man, Don is just killing it with the segues today. So resourcing, it's something that you're going to hear us talk about as we talk about these tools. It happens at the team level and not the individual level within advanced roadmaps. Sometimes it's a showstopper for clients that want to implement a PPM tool, but it's just something to be aware of. And to date, that is currently what's available. It's always possible down the road that there's feature sets that are going to be added on later. And so if I go over to the left pane here and click on teams, just to denote that, this is where I can manage teams in the project, add new teams. And then if I click into actually one of the existing teams, I can go into team settings, and I have a little bit more granular control over choosing a planning style, naming the issue source. So currently I'm pulling from a board for this particular team. I can designate my sprint length, capacity points, etc. And Wade's our lone member on this team. And then I can also add additional teams, and we can select teams from the organization there or create a new team as well. And then also denote whether or not it's available across the organization or if it's only in the plan. So something also to be aware of there. Real quick side note, and this will make more sense when I jump into one of the other applications I'm going to show you, but there's not this idea of skills capability within this tool. And so just something to be aware of there. So in one of the other tools, Big Picture specifically, I'm going to show you, there's this idea of a skill that you can assign to an individual, and then you can use that in capacity management and planning there, resource planning there. So not available in this tool, just to share that. So real quick, one last little feature that I want to show you is a feature called the auto scheduler, which is kind of interesting. So you can actually auto schedule your dates here, choose whether it's your sprints, releases, teams, and then preview the results. And ultimately what will happen is robots in the background are trying to essentially look at everything you have within your plan and then suggest basically some planning adjustments that you could make, denoted by the purple barber poles here. So kind of a cool feature. And then essentially auto scheduler, just to get a little bit deeper dive, it takes into a few different things into account. It takes issue rank, assignee, story points, sprint info, and a few other things. So just to be aware that that feature is there, kind of neat. Okay. With regard to sharing, so this is something we'll talk about across the apps too. So if you need to share your plan, you can do so up here on the right. When we run engagements, we typically have an engagement space for our clients. And this particular piece is really, really helpful, where we can embed a plan in Confluence. And so we can copy this link and ultimately embed it via some macro in Confluence and have our plan presented right where we want it within our Confluence engagement space. But you have the option to embed your plan. You can share a link to it. You also have, you can export it to a CSV, or what I've actually used occasionally in emails is just generating an image file that I can actually just copy and paste as I need, and share just on a high level, kind of where things are at. So a lot of sharing capability here. And you can also even adjust the date range, which is kind of neat, even within the sharing capability. All right, so to wrap up advanced roadmaps, I just want to quickly rattle off a few things about advanced roadmaps that may be helpful to you if you are in a position where you're looking at PPM tools. and are just trying to figure out which one to use. So with regard to estimation, you can estimate your work with story points or time tracking. However, you can't do a hybrid of the two within one plan. There's also no native conversion of story points to time. Jira automation I've seen can leverage or shoulder this responsibility quite well. There's no critical path functionality. There's no baseline functionality. There's no earliest start, and there's no cross-plan resource view. So those are things that are feature sets that you'll see in some of the other tools that we're talking about today. And then some big, maybe deciding factors for you. It is native with the Atlassian ecosystem and Jira specifically, not a Gantt chart. It is great for road mapping. Team level resourcing is a restriction, maybe for some groups, may not be an issue. And then you have a lot of great sharing visualization options. All right, rolling right along here for the sake of time. Let's talk about Structure and Structure Gantt. So Structure is an issue hierarchy app that's developed by Tempo, and it has a very robust Gantt chart add-on called Structure Gantt, aptly named. So I want to make sure that I'm making this abundantly clear. Structure is its own app. Structure Gantt is its own app. You need the two to see the view that you're looking at right now on the screen, or at least the screenshot. So it is two different add-ons. It is available in Jira Cloud and Data Center. And when it comes to the tool, the primary object, or at least if you have this marriage of Structure and Structure Gantt, the primary object is a true Gantt chart, which is built from the structure that you see on the left. And so each Structure Gantt combo has its own definable scope, hierarchy, views, scenarios, baselines, scheduling and resourcing behavior, and then also some quick filters. So with that, let's go ahead and take a peek at Structure here. And just a note too, the Structure app itself can be quite useful even on its own. If you're just needing an app that just shows you a nice roll-up where you can add different custom fields to the view, it's quite useful even on its own. So even if you're not interested in pursuing, a Gantt chart per se, or need that capability, it is quite useful on its own. So as I said, on the left side, or maybe I haven't said yet, on the left side, you have what we're referring to as a structure that's showing that roll up that looks very similar to what we saw in advanced roadmaps with epics and initiatives as parents to our bug and tasks and stories. And then similar to advanced roadmaps, you can add additional fields here by clicking this plus button here. You have some structure specific fields. You have your agile fields. I will say I like how they categorize a lot of these. It's almost kind of by tool. You have tempo, with some advanced roadmaps fields, and then you have some item fields as well. So you can see how tiny my scroll bar is. There's a lot of options here to visualize ultimately any data set that you really want or any combination of data sets that you would like. And then on the right side, we have a true Gantt chart with regard to date behavior. Dates are automatically determined and duration is already set based on the properties of each work item. So if I click into one of these here, if I click into this bar, for example, there are several options for kind of scheduling even on an item by item basis. And we can observe a fixed duration down here if we want. We can also have the option to toggle between auto and manual scheduling on a per item basis. So you can get really granular with setting this up. If you set it to auto, the dates and the duration will be set on the estimate of this particular work item. So just something to be aware of there. And then we got some resourcing behavior, which I'll dive into shortly here. So let's talk about, while we're here, some dependency behavior. So let me click into this dependency that we have here. And we have 4 different types of dependencies. So we have finish to start, finish to finish, start to start, start to finish, as we would expect with a Gantt chart. And then critical path, there is critical path functionality available within this tool. It can be toggled up here on the top right. If I toggle it off and on, you can see, well, there's an example somewhere down here that's not apparent on the screen right now, but ultimately you can toggle critical path off and on. What it'll look like is kind of a red box around your time bars. And then with regard to baselines, so juxtapose to advanced roadmaps, you can have multiple baselines. And basically the idea with the baseline is you want to see essentially how far your schedule is kind of crept forward. And so if I go up here to baselines, I don't have any current baselines, but I can create a new one, name it what I want, and then also pick the baseline type, whether it's a Gantt baseline or Jira based. I think that was Gantt and based mixed together. That's a new one.
That's not an option, though.
That's not an option, though. Yeah, you can't have a GACE baseline. In the way of sharing visualizations, there are multiple options. You have export capability. You can add your structure to Jira or Confluence via the share button up here at the top right. And very quickly, just to show you kind of a cool setting here is that you can get really, really granular with how you can kind of slice the data here. So if I go into the settings here in the middle, just wanted to show just another layer of configuration capability. So you have your general settings where you can set appearance and color scheme. You have a whole myriad of scheduling options available to you that you can manipulate and update. One of the cool features that I think is particular, or at least peculiar to this tool, is this idea of being able to create slices of data. And you can create a slice and base it on issue types or a JQL query, which is kind of neat. And so this is something that we get asked about a lot from clients is how can I slice the data? Well, literally within Structure, you have the option to create slices of data that help you in kind of your planning endeavors. So just wanted to highlight that. And then let's talk about resourcing behavior, and I can toggle that on here in the middle. And ultimately, let me actually see if I can scroll to, let me scroll over here. Perfect. And then I want to, where are you, Brian? Okay. Yeah, so we can see, if I'm scrolled to the right issue, you can see hours down here at the bottom right. They'll be denoted, and you can ultimately look at hours or percentage capacity. And then also, too, if I click on a resource, I have the ability to designate a unit for this particular resource, the time zone that they're working in, and then the work category. And then I can also set some availability and then also a capacity percentage on a resource by resource basis. And so what's nice is based on the settings that I'm showing you now, resource assignment can happen on an individual or team basis. So juxtaposed to advanced roadmaps, you can resource on the individual level. And then availability, we won't get into this, at least in this demonstration, but availability of resources is handled through shared calendars with working hours and time zones and holidays that all are taken into account. And then ultimately resources can be temporarily assigned a percentage as well. And so just some things to take into mind when you're talking about a tool or PPM tool and resource and or capacity management. And to that end, concerning capacity adjustments, you can set resource units as well as a work calendar per resource. So very, very granular in configuration option. And then also too, you may have saw it earlier when I was looking, or when we looked at one of these issues, you can actually set units or basically set a numerical value to max units available on a per issue by issue basis, and then also set a default resource as well. So just again, showing you the granularity of being able to tie those resources to an issue or an issue by issue basis. Okay, real quick, let's jump back to the slideshow just for the sake of time. So just want to rattle off, similar to advanced roadmaps, a couple of things to take into consideration if you're looking at PPM tools. There are sandbox capabilities for Structure, but it is only in data center. So something to take into consideration. Another way of putting that is any changes that you make in Structure are getting pushed back to Jira Cloud or Jira, well, specifically Jira Cloud. There are several estimation options. You can estimate in story points, time tracking, or formulas. You can also perform automatic conversion between story points and time, which is a pretty cool feature available in this tool. Resource leveling is only for DC. There's no early start, early finish, late start, late finish constraints. And then you don't have the skills capability that I'm about to show you in big picture. And then there's no cross-plan resource view, which is also particular to big picture. So some other things to consider. You do have that slice of data capability, team and individual resourcing, opportunity for multiple baselines, durations based on estimates, structures, like I mentioned earlier. Even just the structure app alone can be quite useful. Maybe you find that you don't need the Gantt chart piece of the planning tool. Structure might just be the app for you. Like I mentioned, no skills, resource leveling, DC, sandboxes, DC, and it's great for sharing visualizations. Lots of options there. Very quickly, let's take a look at big picture here. And so big picture is kind of what we refer to here as the multi-tool or Swiss Army knife of PPM tools within the Atlassian ecosystem, and in this case, within the marketplace. It contains a product called Big Gantt, but also includes modules for Agile and program boards. So it can be very focused on team planning, but also grow in its use, or at least, in scope of its use, for having Agile, full-blown Agile and program boards, risks. You've got roadmaps and objectives. There's an expanded resource view that's particular to this tool that includes workload plans, holiday plans, and skills. I believe that feature is only available on Big Picture Enterprise. And then there's also teams, calendars, and additional reporting if you use the full version of Big Picture. So with advanced roadmaps, you have a plan. Within structure, you have a structure and a Gantt chart. The primary unit of organization within Big Picture is done in something called a box, and we'll kind of show you what that looks like. And so within Big Picture, you get unlimited box types. Or I'm sorry, within Big Picture Enterprise, let me be clear. You get unlimited box types, unlimited scenarios, cross-box resource views, module renaming, tempo integration, interestingly enough, and also data residency, and then also some advanced reports modifications. Real quickly, Big Picture is available in Jira Cloud and also in Data Center. So tool organization, like I said, each box has its own definable scope. What you see in the screenshot is actually this box. It's probably teeny tiny, but this is a box here. And this is the home screen that you're met with when you first open Big Picture. And quick side note, if your Trello organization, boxes can actually bidirectionally sync with Trello cards. I would be really interested to see how that's played out. I've never set that up. Box types define how boxes relate to each other with parenting. So you might be able to see this on the screenshot. You kind of have this nesting relationship, similar, not totally dissimilar to an issue hierarchy that we saw. And also contain template metadata that can be changed once a box is created. Some example box types, just to kind of pique your interest or at least get your wheels spinning. You could have box types that are portfolio, a program increment, and kind of in line with agility or the agile approach. But for more traditional planning, a box type could also be a project, a phase, or initiative. So just showing that you're not limited to a framework, or you can use the tool essentially how you need to and where your organization is at. All right, let's talk about big picture. So first thing I want to talk about is date behavior. So issues appear in a Gantt-based chart over here, and you have manually updated start and end dates or auto-scheduled dates based on these dependency links that you see here. It does not look at estimates, however, to determine duration. So referring to scheduling options on a per item basis, you can select top-down, bottom-up, manual, or locked scheduling options. So if I go into this deprecate the Phoenix system here, you can go to scheduling mode and see those options available to you here. All right. And then ultimately, this is where I can lock things into place. I can dictate scheduling with auto bottom up or auto top down as well with these toggles here. So while I'm here, let's talk about dependency behavior. So if I click into a dependency here, I can see the dependency type. I can ultimately choose the true Gantt dependency types that we talked about here, or soft dependency. And so soft dependency refers to dependencies via Jira links versus the Gantt dependencies. So kind of an interesting layer there. And then you also have this ASAP mode, which allows kind of for looser scheduling while still respecting the link type here that can be toggled here as well. In reference to sandbox capability, they are available in big picture, but you're limited to one private and one essentially not private scenario. You have to upgrade to big picture enterprise in order to have multiple sandbox. So if I click live at the top, I can create a new scenario, but I'm essentially limited to whether it's private or not. With regards to estimation, tracking is done by using Jira's original estimate or remaining estimate fields. Critical path is available. Baselines are also available. You have early start, early finish, late start, late finish constraints. And then you also have a whole slew of share options up here on the right. Somewhat more limited than the other applications, but still you need an additional add-on if you want to actually have more than what you see here. Very quickly, I want to jump into resourcing behavior. If I click on our show hide resources here, we can see the resources that we have within this particular box. And we can also see total workload here denoted by if I click into the box here, I can see a total workload, remaining estimate, remaining capacity, and then also see what Brian's currently working on. Something important to note, so resourcing in big picture is individual only. So just something to consider, you don't have team-based resourcing, it's only on the individual level. All right. Real quick, I just want to show you the skills capability as promised, and then we can go on to just talking about Jira Align at kind of a high level. So if I jump into a project here, and let's say I want to jump into, we could look at the Alpha project, for example. So with big picture, you have this option to, on an issue by issue basis, if I go into it, you have this field that's available to you. And it's called the skills field. And what this will do, it basically searches skills that you've built out within big picture. I can choose developer and then click this button that says find the perfect match. And ultimately it's going to, at least how it would be set up if we've got it fully flushed out, apologies there, but ultimately what it's going to do is pull up several different individuals that would be good candidates to ultimately work on this piece of work on an individual or an issue by issue basis. And it gives you kind of a percentage tied to that individual, whether they're 50% or 100%, a good choice for allocating to this particular issue. So kind of a cool feature. All right. We've got some deciding factors here that I'll kind of let you ingest. Just a couple of high level things here. Let's go ahead and pop on here as well. And then I want to make sure we have enough time for some questions at the end. Do we want to just talk really quickly high level on Jira Align?
Yeah. So, like Sam mentioned, Jira Align also has its own whole webinar. So this is going to be, an inch deep and maybe only a foot wide. But effectively, Jira Align is for very large enterprises who have hundreds or thousands of individuals who are working in teams and departments and portfolios and divisions that need a whole top level down organizational structure. So it's a standalone application that connects to Jira, and there's several different layers of scaling effectively. So here in the left graphic, you can see, Jira at the bottom. You have your bidirectional sync, but that's really sort of just at like the team level, right? And then above that, you have program, solution, portfolio, and whole enterprise planning tools. So there's a lot of levels of scaling and planning that Align comes with, right? And there's the other graphic kind of shows what that can look like from a issue type perspective. So at the lowest level, you've got the team with stories and tasks, and then a program with features and epics, and then a portfolio and or solution that have organizational epics or initiatives and themes, and then at the whole enterprise level, ultimately a whole strategy, right? You're typically, the lowest time unit is looking at program increments or quarters. If you get more granular than that, you're probably really more looking at sort of team level, planning. And even setting this up is quite a meaningful exercise. It takes on average 3 months, or maybe even minimum 3 months, depending on the complexity of the organization, what culture change or process change or cleanup may need to take place ahead of time to standardize projects so that they can all be ingested into Align and mean the same things. So it has, roadmaps and OKR support. You've got dedicated program boards, strategy rooms. It's very feature rich, but it is very much intended for very large companies with hundreds of thousands minimum individuals. So again, we have another webinar that we go into great depth around what Jira Align entails.
Thanks, John. That's great.
Here's a visual of a program board example that if you need that level of like scaling and separation and abstraction, this can be super helpful. And we kind of talked through
I was gonna say we kind of talked through some of this.
I was just trying to go a little quickly so that in case we got some good questions, we can focus on that.
And just quick plug for just Valiantus as a whole, just to kind of share very briefly who we are and what we do if you're not familiar. So we are a partner with Atlassian, have been a Platinum Solutions partner for a number of years. Our partnership started back in 2006. We have a bunch of different areas of discipline that we excel at. Cloud migrations, ITSM solutions, Agile at Scale, and Agile at Scale training. And then we also offer managed services, and then also a lot of just training in general. And so that's kind of just a broad strokes of some of the disciplines that we really excel at. If you have any questions, and we're hopefully going to get to those in a moment, but if you have any needs that you feel might require, some kind of engagement where we can follow up with you after, please don't hesitate to reach out also during the Q&A session. Love to help you guys learn more about what you are trying to tackle as a company, as an organization, and how we might be able to help. And with that, to what Don mentioned, we do have a Jira Align bootcamp coming up. I believe in the chat, we're going to be sharing some of the events that are coming up. We encourage you to visit our website and see if any of those pique your interest. And like we said, Jira Align is kind of its own beast and deserves its own bootcamp. And so please look into this if you have some more questions about Jira Align and also our Jira Align webinar. And real quick, feel free to use this 20% off coupon, VAL20, for the Jira Bootcamp. Now, with that, as promised, with a couple of minutes to spare, let's get to Q&A. I believe we have one question. Just to mention, Jira Align is used successfully at large orgs that have fewer employees and resources, and it's not just top-down only planning scenarios. It's useful for large orgs that have typical financial controls and corporate budgeting framework.
So and that's totally fair. I'm thrilled that it can be valuable for even smaller organizations that have those needs. That's great.
That's awesome.
Most of our clients who come to us tend to be larger, but
yeah,
there's no wrong way. Like that's a great example.
Yeah.
There's no single best practice. It's really what suits you.
100%. And going back to what Don was talking about at the front end, the tools are totally malleable. It's really the people and processes that we try to kind of either help our clients with if they don't exist, or at least those processes don't exist. But ultimately, the tools is only as good as its people and processes that precede it. So totally agree. Yeah, most of the orgs I've worked with who use Jira Align are trying to make sure that IT effort is aligned to specific business goals and departmental budgets. Yeah. I could definitely see that being a use case. Thank you for sharing.
Might be something else just in the regular
let me
chat.
see if we got something in the regular chat as well. Yes, you can. Yeah, so the question is, can you have more than 3-level hierarchy of story, epic to initiative and advanced roadmaps? Absolutely. Actually, a client that I was working with relatively recently was rolling everything up to like product. So they had epic up to, I think, what they called initiative, and then or theme, and then up to product. It's totally married to the issue type that you configure within Jira. You can call it you can have a high level of hamburger if you wanted to. Ultimately, it's totally configurable, all made available through the parent link within Jira. Great question. Yeah, you're not limited to just that 3-layer hierarchy. Any other questions? I know we're almost about at time here, if not at time.
Check out the
oh yeah, good point. Let me check the chat over here just in case. Good eye. Okay, cool. That's where we're sharing our training, and then also our YouTube channel. Please also don't hesitate to reach out. Let me go to this slide over here. Don and I are both on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Also, these are our email addresses down here at the bottom, how you can get a hold of us directly. Feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to answer any other questions, or even if you have questions after the webinar concludes that come to mind later, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
And please don't hesitate to reach out. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye now.